Hello, welcome back to Up the Villa. This is our match preview, Nottingham Forest v Aston Villa. If you are new around here, make sure you are subscribing. Smash the likes. You've been smashing these like targets. So let's go 600 and comment your thoughts on how you're feeling ahead of Forest. So on this episode, we're going to go in depth on Nottingham Forest. We're going to go to the tactical pad. We're going to have a look at how they play, what are their key strengths. We're going to have a look at some of the images of what they do really well and areas that I think Aston Villa can hurt Nottingham Forest. So, might as well listen up because I called Matty Cash at right wing in the last game. So, listen carefully. Anyone would think I know what I'm going on about at times, but Justin, the day after the night before, a fantastic victory in the Champions League for Aston Villa that has put us right in contention to qualify in the top 8, which is just remarkable. You know, how are you feeling today?
I'm over the moon. I'm so excited. I was so excited, obviously, when we qualified, and then when the sort of realisation of this season dawned last season, when it was 100% confirmed. You start to dream ahead and think, what does that look like? How will it play out? What teams will we play? Then the draw came along, and you're thinking, right, okay. And then when you play that first game, then the reality sets in. So, as brilliant as it is, Champions League, we're a Champions League team. The reality is now, how does this play out for Villa? Where do we finish? How far can we go? And that's where you start dreaming. And obviously the first dream was just to get out of this group stage, brand new format. So it was new to everybody. So I think in a way it's helped Villa because it's our first season back and it's the first season of this total change. So, everybody's going into it, fresh, if you like, even teams that have qualified for Champions League every single season. And I think in a way it's helped us. And I think it's a really good format. Maybe others might disagree, but I really like it. And then it was like, can we not get knocked out in this group stage? Which was always a possibility. If you have a nightmare, there's some big sides down the bottom of that league table, isn't there? If you look at it, that looking down the barrel of getting knocked out. Final, Stuttgart, Prague, Graz. There's some good sides there. So can we not finish down there? That's now not going to happen. We've qualified, whatever. And then the dream of the dreams was to get straight through into the round of 16, which, I think if we win one of our last two, we've done it. To finish in the top 8 out of 36 elite European teams is insane. It is an insane achievement, especially given that everybody would say we're not playing as well as we did last season. So, if we can we could go into next season. If we had a decent run now up to Christmas, we could go into next year in the final 16 of the Champions League, hopefully through to the fourth round FA Cup, and in a really, really healthy position in the Premier League, all after having not as good a start as we had last season. So there's nothing not to enjoy. There's nothing not to be excited about. This is what it's all about, isn't it?
I'd probably say the most difficult aspect of that would probably be trying to get into the fourth round of the FA Cup.
Fourth round of the FA Cup, yeah.
I think that's the most difficult thing we've got to do. But I think why I think we've done so well as well is if you actually look at the Champions League format, we've beat both pot 1 teams. Leipzig and Bayern Munich were both pot 1 teams. Aston Villa were pot 4. So within this whole concept of the Champions League, we technically should have been one of the teams that were down the bottom because we're a pot 4 team. And what we've been able to do is we've been able to grow in Europe, which I think even that's remarkable. Last season was our first year playing in Europe for however many years. We go back to the Martin O'Neill days. But to gain that experience and try and quickly get that European know-how and to go to Leipzig and play our brand of football and our style and our identity and compete with season in, season out European giants like Bayern Munich, Juventus, Leipzig. None of these teams that we've played are mugs. Even you go back to Young Boys who won the league last year. These are teams that are accustomed to winning football matches. And I just think what we've been able to do is remarkable. We've not finished yet. We've got to see the job off now and get into that top 8. And like you say, get that 2-game week off, and then we can sort of go straight into that round of 16 and figure out who we're going to play when we draw them, and tackle it, take them on, and try and strive to get into the quarterfinal. You know, you win the round of 16, you're in the quarterfinals of the Champions League. Anything is possible. So
it's insane, isn't it? I mean, I think what the stat that I like is we've never not ever failed to get to the quarterfinal of the Champions League in our history.
That's written then.
So we've got to do it again.
It's absolutely written. So fantastic stuff. Absolutely loving life. So Premier League then. The league at the minute is very tight, very congested. It's super, super competitive. And I absolutely love it. And I'll tell you why I love it. I am absolutely sick to death of hearing about that big six, the hype that they all get, the oozing of Spurs, Man United, and how it feels to be a fan of Villa, Fulham, Forest, Brentford, Brighton, that you've sort of got no right to be where you are. And I absolutely love it that these teams are going against the grain and actually doing really well this season. Yeah, it's competitive. It's probably even more difficult for Villa because there's more competitive teams in there. But I do feel like, as a Villa fan, that after January, after this real hectic European phase of our season, that it's probably going to level off and we'll start to get a lot more consistency, and we'll probably end the season a lot better than some of the periods that we've had. But you know, I just think for Forest, Brighton, like I mentioned, all those teams, I'm loving it because they're taking it to these teams. They're playing really well. Iraola at Bournemouth, what a job he's doing. Absolutely fantastic. We've got Nuno, who's firing Forest, and it's great to see, you know, Midland sides in there. 2 European giants that have both won the European Cup, right up there, battling it out. I think that's great to see as well. So I just think from a football perspective, I think this league this season is probably one of the most competitive that we've seen, really. And you probably can see that when teams are now starting to come up into the Premier League. I mentioned it a couple of weeks ago that who goes down, you know, which teams go down, because there's, well, yeah, but there's so many sort of teams now that have got really good coaches that play really great football, that gap now is absolutely massive to even be able to stay up. So I think the Premier League at the minute is really good, really entertaining, and I'm absolutely loving it. How are you feeling, Justin, as looking at the table and seeing it as tight as it is?
It's great. It's exciting, isn't it? It's nice to see teams having a go. You know, Forest have been building. You know, they had a bit of a haphazard way of. I will come on to in more detail soon, but haphazard way of going about it. They've signed thousands of players, manager after manager, but they've settled right down and they've come up with a style and a way of playing very similar with Brighton. Have been fantastic for years. You know, their recruitment, the way they go about it, and they lose a manager and they replace him with. I don't know how they do it. They've replaced them with like for like. You know, there's never a drop off, is there, in Brighton? I don't know. You know, that recruit, the back. You know, the ownership at Brighton is phenomenal. Bournemouth was such a. I mean, you look at Bournemouth and you just think, oh yeah, Bournemouth are a good side. They are a tiny club. They've got a tiny stadium. It's ridiculous, you know, what they're doing. So to be 8th in the Premier League, Brentford, another team, Fulham, you know, not big sides at all, and they're above the likes of you got Spurs, Newcastle, Man United in 10th, 11th, 12th, 13th. Then you got Brighton, Bournemouth, Brentford in 7th, 8th, 9th. It's wonderful. It is wonderful. Man City dropping off, brilliant. You know, and we are there or thereabouts again. You know, in this journey we're on over the next sort of 3-4 seasons of just sticking in that top 6, 7. That's what we are. That's the aim now. Every season, 6th, 7th minimum.
Yeah.
That's where we have to be.
That's exactly what I wanted from the start of the season, really. When I did my season predictions and I said any form of European football is a success, I think, yes, we all want to finish higher than last season, but that's going to be very, very difficult. We all want to get Champions League football again. That's going to be very difficult as well. but to see us competing in and around it still, it is absolutely massive. And to be playing Champions League football and to be still in the mix of trying to get, say, our top ambition of maybe top 4 is huge. And I do believe that if we can finish this group stage Champions League European campaign and still be where we need to be, we're not
Yeah.
playing sort of group game and etc. Yes, we'll be playing massive games in the Champions League if we get to the round of 16 and quarterfinals, but I think how congested it is, it probably will ease up a little bit, I think. So, and that's what you'll see is that if we do get top 8, we don't play that sort of knockout phase to get into the round of 16, so we can just focus fully on the Premier League as well. So I think that's just vitally important.
One of the things I think is, like you say, it's a win-win for me. I think we will finish in the top 8. But if we don't, we get extra 2 games, and I know that throws in 2 extra games in the league. But we're playing Champions League football, so you know who can we pick? There's some really big sides down there as well. But the other important thing I think, which I saw last night, was that coefficient. England are top now of that, which we will. It's looking pretty comfortable that we'll get a 5th place in the Champions League next season. So that drops Europe down to 6th, 7th, 8th potentially next season. But those top 5 positions now, I think I predicted 5th for us next season. This season, sorry. So 5th could get Champions League, so we still could get qualified for Champions League, even with a 5th place finish. So it's important we continue our good run and go as far as we can, because that could help us next season qualify for the Champions League, and if we finish 5th.
Yeah, it's just proper exciting, and I'm absolutely loving life. So we've got Nottingham Forest up, who are in a really good place. They went off a little period where they were struggling for a few games, and they got that massive victory against Manchester United. Nuno is doing Nuno things, really. We've seen what Nuno can do at Wolves, and I really do feel a sense of something is happening there. I watched the interview with Marinakis on Sky. That was really good. He was really honest. He was talking about his vision of how he wants to grow Forest and talking about Olympiacos, etc. So that was a really good insight as well. And yeah, he seems like a really cool, hardworking guy. But yeah, Nuno, I see similarities between Forest and Wolves, how they're playing and the style that they've got. It was very. I think their away form is better than their home form at the minute, and that's very Nuno Wolves-esque. The sense of he went to so many big places like Man City, was able to get the victory there at Wolves, and I do really see those types of similarities between the two teams, and they're doing really well, and their system's good. They play a 4-3-3. Aina, their right back, he's bombing on. He's been probably one of their best players this season. And they've got 2 holding players, and some games, the 2 holding players, whether it's Anderson or Yates or Dominguez, one will either sit or 2 will sit. So they've got that versatility there. Big strengths out wide, whether it's Hudson-Odoi, Silva or Elanga. Gibbs White is an absolute pressing machine. If they get into these areas, one presses, one goes. You've got 5 players that are going to be pressing the opposition, win the ball back on transition. They are absolutely dynamite, electric on transition. They've got 2 good centre halves. Moreno for Villa, he started the season really well for them. And Chris Wood has turned into Woodinho, a Brazilian version of Chris Wood. He's brilliant. He's a goal scorer. He's just an out and out goal scorer that knows where the back of the net is, and he's playing really well, and he's got so many goals, and he's absolutely smashing it. So, from a Villa perspective, I feel like this is going to be a really difficult game, like every game in the Premier League's difficult. But I'm optimistic that we can get something from this game. So, Justin, what have you made of Nottingham Forest this season?
Yeah, they've been brilliant. You can't really take anything away from them. Yeah, like you say, it does hark back to when he was manager of Wolves and had that amazing run up to into Europe, didn't he? And he got them flying. He's got them all playing together. The team spirit seems to be good. you know, they've just cobbled together a really good side. And I know, like I said earlier, they've signed about 2,000 players over the last 4 seasons. So it just took, a bit like Chelsea, I suppose, it took a manager to go in there and see the wood from the trees, really, to really weed out an 11 and then a 17 that can be like their matchday squad week in, week out, and then get the best out of those players. I mean, the best one in the world, Chris Wood, journeyman, I think it's fair to say he's had about 100 teams by the look of it. I'm looking at his over the last few seasons: Millwall, Leicester, Ipswich, Leeds, Burnley, Newcastle, Forest. And he's found a home at Forest, and he's having the season of his life, and everything is just dropping for him. And fair play to him, he's a handful, he's a big lad, he leads the line really well, and he's finishing this season has been exceptional. What can you say? They're going to be a real handful. When they signed like the likes of Hudson-Odoi from Chelsea, that was a bit of an eye-opener. I always quite liked him. I thought he's a good player. To go to Forest at the time was a big step down, I think, for him, because they were struggling down the bottom of the league. But it's proved to be a good move for him. He's really invigorated his career. They've got some really good players in midfield. I love Elliot Anderson. I think it's been a good move for him. He's established himself as probably the player of the season at Forest so far in that double pivot. So, they match up pretty well to us, playing a similar style to us. The formation is very similar to us. Gibbs White, like you say, we've got to keep an eye on him because he can open the door for them. So they've got key players in good form in key areas of the pitch. So make no mistake about it, we have got to be massively, massively on it on Saturday evening. A kick-off, 5:30, under the floodlights. It's a tight ground to be at. The crowd can be very, very hostile there if they're playing well. I've seen us win there. I've seen us lose there. So it's going to be a real, real barnstorming game, I think.
Yeah, it is going to be a big one. If we have a little look now at Chris Wood this season, Premier League, you'll see 10 goals. But the biggest thing for me is that goal conversion rate. 37%. That is absolutely staggering, eye-opening at how good it is. So he's banging form, and Villa have got to be careful of this because we know that we gift opportunities at times and there can't be any gifts there. You have a look at where Wood's playing this season. Heat map galore in the penalty area on that penalty spot. He knows where the back of the net is, and then he's dropping a little bit deeper as well. If we have a little look then at some of the areas that Nottingham Forest are doing things really well, it's in this area here. The ball's drops in the middle of the pitch. We've got Gibbs White, who's able to play the ball into this area through here, and Nottingham Forest are away. They're breaking, and this is all about where they do their damage, getting that ball as quick as possible into those wide players and then into these channels through here. So we've really got to be careful on transition. Again, this is a real great pass from Gibbs White into Moreno through here. We've got to watch the runners that are going to be peeling off, those little blindside runners that are peeling off into space as well. You can see the width with Aina, and you can see out wide on the opposite side as well. And then you can see that Gibbs White has dropped into this little area through there as well. And then supporting Wood, we've got Alanga in there as well. We've also got another opportunity here, and this is just something that we've got to be careful of. This was the cross that I showed you earlier. So we've got Chris Wood, who his movement, he just goes, peels off, free space. Great movement in there from Chris Wood. So those are some of the things that I've picked up on, especially on transition, especially on the counter-attack. Very direct, very powerful. Gibbs White, edge of the box as well. We've really got to watch out for that as well. Some things that I've spotted from a Villa point of view of where I think we can get joy against Nottingham Forest is a trait and a characteristic of what we do anyway, is that playing straight through the middle. Straight through the middle. If you are able to bypass the Nottingham Forest front 4 or 5, if that's what they're going to press with, then there's a big gap from here to this area through here where there's a lot of space that once you can turn that front 4 or 5, then you're running on goal onto their back 4 or 5. So here we can see that Leicester managed to play through the Nottingham Forest press, and then we can see here now that they're driving forward on goal and they're looking to try and exploit this Nottingham Forest back 4 and a couple of midfielders as well. Newcastle were able to do it as well. They were able to break on transition and drive centrally. So I think the pattern there is something that Villa like to do. We like to go through the middle. We saw the goal that Duran scored against Leipzig. Ball into Tielemans. Tielemans forward vertical pass into Duran. A little bit of a link up. And then we're able to score through there. So those are some of the areas that I feel like Villa will try and exploit against Nottingham Forest. Justin, after all that, we're going to have a little chat now about a Mr. John Duran. I feel like John Duran is one of the best young strikers in European football. He's scoring banger after banger after banger after banger, and the talent is just oozing through him. The belief that he's got in his own ability, it feels like big striker mentality, and I'm just absolutely loving it. And I think what I'm loving even more as well is that he's got his head down, he's humbled up a little bit, and he knows his role within this Villa team. Because last season there was a little bit of friction and a little bit of he didn't quite get on board with what was expected from him. But I feel like now, I heard his interview that he did after the Leipzig game saying he's relishing the competition with Ollie Watkins as well. And I think that's absolutely brilliant to hear him say that. We've always thought, what's it got to take for him to start games at Villa? Because he's quickly becoming very, you can't ignore him anymore because when he plays, he scores. And I think the big question mark was before was that he wasn't able to do what Ollie did. He wasn't able to press. He wasn't able to do the other part apart from score goals. But I'm really starting to see in his performances now that he's actually doing the pressing. He's actually linking up play. And his overall game is very, very good. So we spoke yesterday about the difficult thing that Unai is going to have to choose between. But how are you feeling of the whole picture now?
I totally agree with you. I think it was right that he started the season as the backup striker after everything that happened last season. We saw flashes of brilliance. We saw what a player he could be. And then it all settled down, and we started the season with two really good strikers. Ollie Watkins was the out-and-out number one choice. Everybody could see that. And Duran's job this season was to put himself in a position to challenge Ollie Watkins and to take that mantle as Villa's number one striker and the regular number one starter. And he couldn't have done much more. He couldn't have asked for any more out of him. Like you say, he stayed out of the headlines for the wrong reasons. He's been in the headlines for the right reasons. He's done some really nice interviews after games. He hasn't had that many turns when he's been hauled off in games. He's had one or two little strops, but everybody has those. I've no problem with that. And he's put himself now smack bang in a massive conversation of who is actually our number one striker at Villa. And that's what you want. That's what he wanted. That's what Unai Emery wants. That's what we want. You got two top players battling out for a position up top. What's not to like? So now it's up to the manager to decide, what do I now do with these two players? And it's been difficult to get them both into the team as strikers. This is why I still think, a bit like we saw with Matty Cash yesterday, playing in a slightly unusual position for him, that there potentially could be a way of getting Ollie in, not as a second striker, but as one of the wide players, in the Bailey position, in the Jacob Ramsey position off the left. Potentially. I'm not sure Ollie Watkins in the long term would want to play second fiddle regularly to John Duran. I think it's okay when they're battling it out and playing regularly, coming on and coming off for each other. But if you could find a way for Ollie Watkins to maybe slip back into an attacking role that isn't the second striker role, which we've seen McGinn played it very well last night. Could that work? I don't know. There's been no inclination of that ever happening. He hasn't tried it. When he's played them both together, they're both more or less played up top together, one off the other. But I think with the lack of form of our wide players and the fact we've had to play Matty Cash in that right role, is there a way of maybe dropping Ollie into one of them positions? I don't know. It would take the pressure off Ollie a bit, I think. Everybody's questioning his finishing, how many chances he does miss. So if you do play John Duran as the out-and-out striker, and you play Ollie Watkins in one of them left or right side roles, where we know he can run with the ball, we know he can run the channels brilliantly, he does it all the time, and his game has improved. Would it take the pressure off him in the goal scoring terms? I don't know. It's a very intriguing question that over the next 2 or 3 months we're going to find out the answer to. But for me, John Duran is very, very close now to being a starter for us.
Yeah, I think it's a very difficult decision for Unai. I understand why you feel like Watkins can play wide, but I think the dynamic of Watkins, I don't think he would like that. I think Watkins would feel like he's been demoted, and I just don't think I just don't think it would. I just don't think it would work. And I do think it's either one or the other. I think if we could get them both in the same team, brilliant, because, Watkins will probably end up on nearly 20 goals this season in the Premier League. That's a lot of goals. Duran could probably end on something similar. That's a lot of goals. And at this moment in time, when you look at across the whole scheme of our team, there aren't loads of goals from everywhere else. It's like Duran and Watkins do score goals. So to get them in the same team would be ideal, really. But I just think it doesn't quite work. But then on the other hand, you're looking at
the only reason I sort of think that before you move on is that if you look at both of both players, how they play, I don't think Duran could play either of those roles. I don't think that's in his game. But Ollie has obviously got history playing as winger, and then he transferred into the striker role. So, and we all know that the manager loves players that can play multi-dimensional positions. So it wouldn't be a stretch for Unai to pull Ollie to one side and say, "Okay, we need to get John in the team because he's doing really well, but we don't want to lose you. We don't want you to feel like you're being left out. How do you feel about maybe trying this role?" I don't know. I say I don't think it's ideal, but I wouldn't want either of them to leave, if I'm brutally honest, because we've got two wonderful strikers. And what a brilliant position. If you lose one of them, whoever it is, if a huge bid comes in the summer for John Duran from an elite club, you're gutted he's leaving. But then if Duran's the number one striker and Ollie thinks, you know what, I'm not getting enough game time, I'm an England player now, I want to be the number one striker, and leaves, it's a shame. But it's a shame if either of them scenarios played out, it'd be a gutting. So how can you make it work? I agree with you. I don't think two strikers, we just don't play with two strikers, do we? So there's not that position to fill. So who could play in one of the other roles? The only one for me is Ollie. Would he want to do it?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think, what we're talking about with Duran, you can't ignore him anymore, because the goals that he's scoring, they're not normal goals. They're within football at the minute. That goal that Duran scored against Leipzig is not normal. Players don't shoot like that anymore. They're reluctant to shoot. If we could find a metric of the amount of goals that are happening from outside the edge of the box, I reckon it's within the Premier League. I reckon it's probably less than 20%. I reckon there's, that you just don't see, and he's got this shoot on sight mentality, which he's fantastic. I think because Ollie's got this little slight knock from the game, I'm inclined to say Duran will start, which probably will be an easier solution for this weekend anyway. But, he's brilliant. I love him. I'm so happy that he's settled down and he's got his head down as well. So fair play to him. Right. So Justin, let's just we'll predict the lineup, but I just want to show everybody the little subtle tweak that Unai did against Leipzig. And some people will remember some of the episodes I did a couple of weeks ago, and I was talking about I want Unai to be a little bit more flexible. I want to see him do some of these in-game sort of changes based on the opposition. I felt like we weren't really doing that as much. So what I want to show you is I want to show you the average positions against Southampton. And we pretty much played the exact same formation / system as what we normally do, with Matty Cash going in for Leon Bailey. And I'll repeat, I did call it, guys. I did call it. But what we did is we did something just a little bit different. What we allowed was for our defenders to shuffle across a little bit and to cover more distance and more ground by becoming a 3. We allowed Matty Cash to be up and down and offer more defensive protection when we were out of possession. So if we have a little look at, this was Southampton. So what you can see against Southampton, it's our back 4 with Boubacar Kamara screening the right back. So a general normal shape of what we have become accustomed to, with Luca Dean bombing on and offering the width, and Leon Bailey staying out wide. So Bailey doesn't have to sort of track back as much. He can stay forward because we've got protection with Konsa sort of tucking in and Kamara being the one that's going to help screen sort of Leon Bailey, so he doesn't have to come back as much. Now, if we go and have a look at the game against Leipzig, this little subtle tweak that we can see from the average positions will show you that we became a flat 3 at the back. Now, what we can see is that Konsa is on that right-hand side of it. We've got Carlos, who's dead central, and we've got Pau Torres, who's kind of in his normal position. But notice what Boubacar Kamara's doing. Boubacar Kamara is normally on the right side of the double pivot, but he wasn't against Leipzig. He was dead on central. So by being central, it allows him to sort of focus more on not the right-hand side. He can press more. You can see he's when I mentioned yesterday on the reaction that he's engaging higher up the pitch. He's pressing a lot more. He's counter-pressing, but he's also doing those recoveries a little bit more central. And it was Yuri Tielemans who was getting into that more of an advanced right-sided position, but also covering the right back. But what it allowed was for Cash to get forward, but also to do his defensive work and help out as well. And I think it had real balance, because if we have a look at how, and you've got to think of why we did this. It's not why we did it. It wasn't just because Bailey was injured. So it was Cash in there as well, and vice versa. But look how narrow Leipzig were. So Unai Emery knew how narrow Leipzig were going to be. So he thought, you know what? What's going to kill him? Width. So he adopted Cash as a bit more of like a wing back, because for Leipzig to spread out and get across to our width, they had to cover a lot of ground. So this was a brilliant tactical ploy from Emery. And what it did allow us to do is it allowed us to transition into our attacking spaces quicker and how we want to. Aston Villa want to have a front 5. So by having the wing back of Cash allowed us to have the width on the left with Luca Dean. Look how advanced he was able to go. We've got a front 5 of Digne, McGinn, Watkins, Rogers, and Matty Cash. And then you've got that double pivot holding as well. So it was a real good tactical tweak from Emery. Showed flexibility. And I just thought it was brilliant. Right, Justin, I want to let you predict the whole lineup then. So,
God.
You predict
Throw
the lineup.
me under the bus.
You predict the whole lineup, and I'll chip in when I feel like I need to.
You'll tell me when I'm wrong. Just before I start, do you think he's going to make a few changes? I'm not going to say who I think. He's not going to keep the same team, is he?
Yeah, he's going to make. Well, he's obviously going to make one Duran, I think, for Watkins. He'll make one at the back, or maybe 2 at the back, and maybe one in central midfield, maybe.
Is Onana fit, do we know?
Yes.
He was
He's been on the bench
last
the
night,
last 2
wasn't he?
games.
Yeah. Okay, so this is what I'd go with.
Go on then.
Olsen in goal. No, I'm joking.
Right, I'll
Martinez
carry
in
on.
goal. Martinez in goal. I think they carry a bigger threat, like you've just said, winger-wise. So I think he might go Konsa.
Yeah.
Hold on a minute. Let me think. Oh, you throw me into the bus here. I think Mings comes in because I think he matches up
I
with
agree.
Chris Wood.
I agree. Mings was saved for this game.
I think so. What does he do with right back? I think Cash put in back to his normal right back role.
I think so as well.
Does he throw Ian Matson in? He hasn't tended to do that at all. I think he retains Luca Dean at left back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And Matson plays the last half an hour as he is. I think Kamara and Onana.
Do you?
Pivot. I do.
Do you?
Because I think what it's going to do, because we've got this problem with the right-hand side, I think McGinn then drops back to the right-hand side role.
Yeah.
And then he's got Tielemans in that slightly advanced position in the middle.
Yeah.
Which I do like
Duran.
him in. Off Duran with Rodgers playing that left-hand side role. I mean, it's pretty fluid, that 3 in behind anyway. I think, you're going to see things happening in and around that anyway.
Yeah, right. Let me just find Rodgers. Where is he? Here we go. Yeah. I think there will be some rotation. I don't think we will do the same thing as what we did against Leipzig with Cash. I don't think that same back four. I think he might revert to something like what we normally do.
For the record, I really liked that formation last night.
Yeah, same.
Because the way we play, because McGinn and Rodgers played sort of attacking roles, it allows us to essentially play wingers, Cash and Dean, and it narrows our front three.
I mean, do you think he will be that impressed with what he did, and he might sort of like stick with what we saw, and so Konsa, and then
he'd have to play Konsa and Carlos then, but
yeah,
I don't know. I think I want to see Konsa and Mings together. To be honest, I just got this thing with Carlos that he's got a rick in him, and he can switch off passing it out from the back.
Yeah,
and I think McGinn on that right hand roll is so energetic as well. He gets up and down. I think that would cut anything they've got on the left hand side off with McGinn and Cash. Rodgers plays in behind.
What about,
I like Tielemans in the 8/10. And I think Onana comes back in because he adds physicality in the midfield, and we haven't seen Onana and Kamara together. They are strong in centre midfield. Forest, they're player of the season, as I was saying earlier. Anderson, and Yates, I think it is, that sits in there, and also Gibbs White does a lot of damage. So you want 2 destroyers in there for me to really break up the play.
Yeah, I think we need to be very strong, and I think if you've got Kamara,
it feels like an old-fashioned English game. This stuff,
yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. So we've done enough chatting then. So that's probably something that we'd pick. Something similar. So Villa fans, let us know your thoughts. Let us know your thoughts on how you're feeling as a Villa fan, and then we will be back with the opposition preview. Presser will be on Friday, so we'll be doing that, and then we'll react to the game on Saturday, and then we'll go into the last game before Christmas against Man City. So what a game that is to look forward to, and hopefully we go away happy into Christmas. And then we got Newcastle, we got Brighton, so some tough games coming up. But yeah, no Champions League now till January, so we can just focus on the league and like Justin said, try and get to the next round of the FA Cup. So cheers everyone for watching. Up the Villa.
Up the Villa.